that moment when someone says, I played a Najdorf. Something that has happened to me a number of times last 20 years of chess coaching. It is wrong from so many perspectives, on so many levels. And in this video, I'll try to reveal all those layers of absurdity when it comes to playing the Najdorf. Of course, the first condition is to think from perspective of a beginner level player. Now, for a beginner, it is essential to know what a certain move does and what are the consequences of our action and why it is better to do this and not that. In other words, a coach is trying to make the game as logical as possible to their student, while a student is putting an effort to understand every move on the board. That's the whole point of teaching someone new to chess. And when they see the Najdorf Sicilian, they would be screaming why the a6 move needs to be played. Probably they would continue by thinking, why not something more natural, something like maybe developing the other knight or doing something for one of the bishops. That's what a beginner who just started to learn the opening principles would be thinking, and that's what they should be thinking at that point. But let's assume that our student, a beginner, somehow has got to the point of a ridiculously looking a6. Next thing is basically to study all the lines that white can possibly use against the Najdorf. And maybe memorize? Really, we want them to memorize any move. Not to mention the number of moves in the Najdorf. Practically, we're coming to that. We're going to spend quite some time going over the sharp lines, sub-variations, which can go up to move 30, and suddenly we are facing some unclear notions such as bishop pair, weak king, pawn storm, space advantage, central control, minority attack on the queen side, center majority, and so on. In order to play such opening, one needs to be willing to spend tremendous amount of time studying something that cannot be understood unless being much above the beginner's level. So it is sort of an absurd situation, and if someone tells you to study or play the Najdorf as your first or among first openings, that one is definitely telling you the stupidest thing one can tell to a beginner level player. And I'll add that it must be someone terribly bad in teaching overall. You don't need to even know that this opening is out there. But say you are willing to study it again and you make a huge mistake by spending precious time trying to understand it. How can you even get into such thing called Najdorf? One needs to play e4 against you, and after your c5 to respond with knight f3, which is far from being the only move there. But okay, say that's done, and you play d6. And again, why would white choose d4 among other things? Do you want to evolve into studying what to do in case of third move c3 or bishop b5 check? Hey, never mind. Say they play the way you want. Say they play d4, and you take there. You probably don't want to forget that being only a beginner, we need most of our time to spend doing tactical puzzles. We also need to work on our visualization. Basic endgames are extremely important. And finally, some basic positional concepts. We cannot find so much time to get to know the Najdorf among so many other things that are far more useful and things that can improve our general chess knowledge much more. Now, this may be seen as going against Sicilian in general, but overall I'm not really saying that. A beginner level player must, and I'm going to stress it again, must play the moves that are understood and that can be explained to their coach or anyone asking, why did you do it? And although a beginner will be struggling to answer why the Sicilian is played, it is still much easier, much simpler to tell the benefit of playing first c5 and then d6 and then knight f6 than explaining what is this thing a6, which is obviously coming from a completely different planet. And of course, one shouldn't impose such concepts to a beginner. Now, I'm assuming that most of you are thinking that every opening requires some level of understanding beyond the beginner's level. That's completely true, and that's why we're not studying the openings first. We're studying typically the end games and then middle games, and then finally, once we start to understand the concepts of middle game play, then only we start studying the openings. But okay, say we'd like to prepare an opening. Some of those are definitely easier to understand. For example, playing e4, e5 is as simple as saying control the center because the piece's ability to move freely depends on it. Okay, so that's so simple. You're basically aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. Also, playing knight f3 on the second move is logical as saying, without having my pieces out of their initial spots, I can't do any harm to the opponent. Therefore, I want them out. And with the knight f3, I'm also attacking their pawn, means forcing the opponent to do some defensive action, means preventing them from attacking me. This is the level of thinking process we'd like to impose when teaching someone. And if we'd go beyond it too soon, they'd start seeing the game as something too difficult and, even worse, illogical, which makes one think that they're not good enough or smart enough for chess. The game is too difficult, and so on. Now, there are more of these advices, and I'm planning to make more videos on this topic these days. But is this interesting for you? I mean, or maybe it's too obvious? Let me know in the comment section.